Hello, today we're going to talk about how to make a solitaire ring using Grasshopper Gold. I'm starting with a brand new Grasshopper Gold file. If you look under the Grasshopper tab here and go to G or new G, that'll create a new Grasshopper Gold file with all the appropriate view settings and layers and whatnot. The first thing you do when you're creating a ring is to create the ring rail. You click on ring rail. I'm going to make this a size 7 ring because that's pretty standard. Click on US sizes, size 7. Great, looks great. If I hit create, it doesn't look like anything happened, but it created it. Just trust that it created it. If you keep clicking it, you're going to get multiple copies. So I clicked it multiple times. I close this. I have multiple curves. You don't want a lot of extra curves in your file, so try not to do that. Okay, I've got a ring rail. Step 2, add your main stone. So when we're making a solitaire ring, often you'll want to use a die struck head. What that means is you would create your CAD file and print your file that doesn't have a head in it, and you'll buy a die struck head. The reason is die struck heads are stronger than cast heads. Also, if you create a mounting that you can put a separate head in, you can put different size stones in there, so it's more versatile. But we need to know how to make this around a particular stone, so we're going to put a stone in and put kind of a temporary head in. Okay, so if we go to jewelry setting, that's where our stones live. This first command is your stones. In this case, I want a round stone, and I want a 1 carat, so 6.5 millimeters. There we go. And this kind of tells you the carat weight here. That looks good. Hit create. Again, it created it, and it created a layer just for that item. And it named it and everything. So close that. There's my stone. If you click on your stone and you don't see these little arrows, that's called the gumball. That's this guy down here. If I turn it off, see, it disappears. But you want that on because it makes things a lot easier to move around. I can just take this arrow and drag it up. If I wanted to rotate it, I could grab this and rotate it around, but I don't want to do that. I double clicked on my label here so I could get all 4 views because I want to position the stone above the ring rail. This is going to be a cathedral solitaire ring. So I know that I'm going to have a little bit of ring here under the stone. So I want to make sure the stone is above that so that the head can come down to right about here and then have the ring here. So that's probably okay. I can move it later. Okay. Next, we're going to put in that temporary head I was talking about. So I want to click on prongs. My gem is already selected, so I just hit select gem, and it's going to throw some prongs on there. I want 6 prongs. That's pretty standard. For smaller stones, you might want 4 prongs, but for a 1 carat stone, 6 is standard. I want to make my prongs this shape, only because that's closer to what a die struck head looks like. When it comes to your prong sizes, that really, when you're designing in CAD, you can make them any size you want. So it really depends on how big the stone is. Anywhere between 0.8 and 1.2 millimeters is pretty standard. Though occasionally you need to go beyond that. I recently designed for a 4.5 carat cushion cut diamond, and they didn't want gallery rails. So because it was such a large stone with no rails and it was cushion cut, I didn't want those prongs to move at all. And I think the prongs were 1.6 or 1.7 millimeters. They were really thick prongs. So sometimes you need a different size. We'll make these, I think, 1.2. That should be good. That's a little big, but it's a main stone, so we want it to be strong. Okay. If you're going to cast this, you want to make your prongs a little taller than you think they should be, so you have room for a thick girdled stone, or if you accidentally sand one off, or you just want to make sure it's plenty tall. This command here, it says distance of stone is what is matrix. Oh, looks like I need to plug my computer in. Okay, my computer's plugged in and will charge now. Okay, right. In Matrix Gold, this is called nudge. And what that is how much your prongs overlap your stone. When I'm designing, I usually design for very little or no nudge, only because when you cast them, they tend to shrink. And I'd much rather not have my setting be too small for my stone. But usually a nudge between 0.1 and 0.2 is pretty good. So you notice the prongs move in. I don't want a full 0.3. That might be a bit much. When you end up cutting your seats for your stones, you don't want to go more than 1/3 of the way through your prong. So I don't need to design for it halfway through my prong. Then my seat would be too, or my setting would be too small. Okay. I want 6 prongs, because that is standard for most die struck heads. Some prongs, sometimes you might have 4 prongs on smaller stones or gemstones, but with diamonds, 6 prongs is pretty standard. I want underneath my stone to come all the way down to almost a point. So I'm going to click here for prong depth and bring that down. That looks pretty good. And I'm not going to worry about moving the girdle. I'm not going to worry about bending the prong, because I would do that if I were going to make a render maybe. But I do want to worry about the lower prong angle here. So bend prong bottom just moves those in, and I want that almost completely to a point. It's okay if there's a little hole down here. That's fine. I don't want to mess with the circle. What that does is changes this arc here. Sometimes you can get prongs or get heads that look like this. If I was putting a gallery rail on it, I might want the head to look like this. But at the moment, I just want it straight. So I'm going to click on the little slider there and type in 0. Great, that's done. Oh man, I forgot. Those prongs are not arranged well. So let's go back. We need 6 prongs. 6 prongs. Go. Okay. We don't like where those prongs are located. And I think they're located that way because it just sets up for an 8 prong and 2 more prongs will go there. But that's not how we want that to look. So we're going to move them. We're going to use this command here. Movements 4 moves these 4 prongs here. Movements 2 moves just 2 of them. Then you can move them all individually. We're just going to move 4 so that it stays nice and even. I don't have to worry about them being crooked or weird. Okay, now that looks better. Now I can hit create. Great. Okay. That angle's weird, but that's okay. This is just a temporary head anyway. So this is going to be a cathedral ring. What that means is the outside of the ring is going to be like a normal ring down here, but then it's going to come up straight like this. Think like flying buttresses. That's probably why they call it a cathedral ring. Okay. So let's see. I need to create an outside ring rail. So we're going to go back to the ring command. And the second command here is going to create your outside ring rail. I'm going to select my rail. There we go. Now, this was a little confusing for me at first to figure out what all this meant. So I'll explain as best I can. This first command here gives you 2 options to change. That's it. If you try to change anything else, see, it doesn't change. This second option gives you all these numbers to change. And each of those you can click on and change the distance from your ring rail to your outside ring rail. This one just has slightly different shapes here. I want to use this one. So you notice it changed a little bit. Okay. I'm going to use this one. Cat top means cathedral. So it kind of straightens this out a little bit. So if I change this dimension, it would be pointier. Let's go see what that looks like. So I'm going to click for this dimension here, bring this way up. See, nice and pointy. If I add pad top, it puts a big flat spot. I think we're just going to leave it cathedral top. Now, if I have that dimension and it's not turned on, see it's more rounded here. We want that kind of straight. That's kind of the aesthetic for this type of ring. Yeah, I prefer to set my bottom thickness at about 1.9, which is a little thick, but that accounts for when you cast the ring and you've got a sprue down here and you're going to file this, you've got a little extra thickness to work with. I'd always rather have a heavier ring than too light and end up with something that's too thin to work with. Then you end up having to laser weld extra metal on or recast, and it's just a pain. I don't need this quite so thick here because I don't want a Euro shank. So I'm going to bring that down a bit. That's good. I don't need these sides this thick. So I'm also going to bring those in a little bit. Just going to kind of eyeball it. This distance here, I can modify that. But I don't want this distance to be less than this distance. That's pretty good. Now for this distance, I want this line to kind of intersect the head. Let's go to the front view so it's easier to see. I want this line to intersect the head below where the girdle is. If it's way up here, you're going to have a heck of a time trying to set your stone. So I want it down in this range somewhere. So let's click on that dimension. We're going to bring this up just a smidge like that. That looks good. Okay. Let's see, we can, this is, oh, that's for the pad. If we had pad on it, which, you know, I'd like that. We can have, this can be much straighter that way. I kind of like that. Let's keep that. I'm going to move this down then to right there. Yeah. So the pad size obviously changes how big that is. I want it right there. And then the blend is the blend from here to the straight line. That looks good. Okay, that's good. Create. Only one curve, that's good. Okay, so that's what the profile of our ring is going to look like. Now we need to create profiles, like if you cut through the ring this way, what it would look like, so that we can create the actual 3D form. We have two commands for that. We have the profile placer on one curve and on two curves. Let's start with one curve. We're going to want part of our ring that comes up under here for the head. So that's the profile I'm going to create right now. It doesn't need to match that outside profile. So it's one curve. That's our ring rail. So we select the curve and look, it puts a profile right on there. Great. I know that this distance is 1.8. So I'm going to make that match. So my height is 1.8. And I think I'm going to want the ring to be about 2 millimeters wide. So 2 millimeters. Excellent. I don't want it bowed out here because that, I'm just going to take that off when I sand it anyway. So right here's the waistline. That's how much it bows. Like, see, those really weird things. Take that all the way down to 0. I'm going to move where this profile is using location. I'm just going to pop it right up here. I don't need it in the middle. I want a little, I'm going to create a little sweep that goes from here to here, from like 10 o'clock to 1 o'clock-ish, 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock. Okay. I kind of want this pretty square. So I'm just gonna make it square. That looks good. Create. Now I'm going to mirror that to the other side of the ring. Your mirror command is right up in here. If you just click on this little arrow or little triangle, you get a whole bunch more commands. That's your mirror command. It wants me to select an object. Okay. Right click or enter. It wants to know what axis I'm going to mirror across. So I want to mirror across the Y axis, which is that blue line there. Done. So great. Now I've got two of them and they're equally spaced across the blue Y axis. If you're ever wondering where your axis is, it shows you down here, X, Y, Z. Okay. Now, that's all ready for sweep, but let's go ahead and make our other profiles first. So I'm going to use the two curve profile placer because I have two curves I want this to fit on. You'll see why in a moment. I need to select both those curves, so I can click, hold down Shift and click the other one to select them both and hit select curves. Now, something very strange is going on with my profile here. It's starting here and ending up here. And if I move it, that doesn't help. This is because the seam on my curve is different. I'll show you. So I'm going to close that without creating a curve. I don't need that. Okay. If I go, I'm still in the ring tab here. Right here, adjust closed curve seam. I'm going to click on that. If I click on my ring rail and right click to enter, I can see that the seam is down here and the arrow is pointing counterclockwise. That's fine. But if I do the same thing with my outside rail, the seam is way up here and it's pointing clockwise. We need those to match. So I'm going to click on it, bring it down here to the bottom. And if your snaps are on, it'll click right there. I click to place it and then click on the arrow to change the direction. That's all I needed to do. Now let's go back and put a profile in. Again, Shift select both curves. Now it at least placed the profile on those two curves, but it's off to the side here. How we change that is this little toggle here. It has different options as to where your profile is going to attach to those curves. That's getting closer, but it's upside down. So we're going with plan D. That's what I want. Again, I'm going to change how this profile looks because that's a little tall and pointy and weird. But I want the thickness to stay 2 millimeters. That's fine. So I'm going to bring that curve down just a bit. It's okay if it's curved. I don't need the inside of the ring to be curved because, again, I'm going to sand it out later, so it might as well be straight. I don't want a waistline. It remembers what I selected last time, so that's good. I can create a fillet on the corners here. We'll do that just so you can see what that looks like. Again, not super necessary. You might want to fillet your edges a little bit just because it will cast better. But again, a lot of that gets sanded and changed anyway. Okay. So I'm going to create that curve. Again, it doesn't look like I did anything, but now if I change the location, you'll see this curve stays put. And this one is my new one. Here's the difference between our single curve profile and our two curve profile. If I change the location up here, see, it automatically gets taller. And I'm going to want my cathedral to come right up here, almost to touch the head. So that's a good position right there. And I want it to be 4 millimeters wide. 4. Okay. But I don't want it all curved up here. I want that absolutely flat. So we're going to bring that all the way down. I'm going to get rid of those fillets or make those fillets much smaller. That's better. I like that. But I have a feeling this is going to look strange when I sweep it, but I'm going to go ahead and go with it just so we can see what that looks like. Okay. That's good. We create that. Okay. Just like we did with these two, we're going to mirror this one. Mirror over the y-axis. I could also type in y if I wanted to. Okay. Oop. Okay. Now I've got them both in there. I want to make sure that this profile goes further into the ring. Okay. Because this sweep is going to end right here. So I want those to overlap. Okay, now we're ready for our sweeps. If we come up here to the regular Rhino tabs and we click on Surface Tools and we look down over here, we have our 2 sweep tools. Just like the rails, we have a 1 rail sweep, or just like the profiles, we have a 1 rail sweep and a 2 rail sweep. Let's start with the 1 rail sweep so you can see what that looks like. So click on that. It says select the rail. That's our ring rail. Select your cross-section curves. So you want to select them in order because you're telling the sweep how to flow. So select this one and this one. Again, it shows me where the seams are. As long as they're in the same spot and pointing in the same direction, we'll be fine. Otherwise, you get a weird twisted sweep, which occasionally you may want, but in this case, we don't. So right click. Now, if you notice, it swept in the wrong direction. So I'm going to cancel because it depends on what order we click these guys in. Remember, our curve itself has a direction. So if it goes in backward for you, just redo it. Click the rail. Now I don't remember which order I clicked them in, but click them in the opposite order. Oh, I see, wrong. There we go. Yes, because remember, our rail was counterclockwise. So we want to click it in this one, then that one. No. Oh. See, I was completely wrong as to why that did that. Click on the rail when you select it in between the 2 curves. There we go. There, there, done. Okay, that's what I want. Silly. Okay. Now we're going to do our 2 rail sweep. Click both our rails. And we're going to click our cross-section curves again. Remember, click them in order. Everything's pointing in the same direction. Great. Okay. Now, a couple of things. I'm going to go to wireframe mode so you can see what I'm talking about. So you can see I have my ISO curves they're kind of not perpendicular to my ring, which in this case doesn't make that much difference. But if you're doing a more complicated sweep, it can definitely mess with things. So how you fix that is add a slash. Click on that and then click on a point on your curve and create a line kind of perpendicular. And see, it straightened everything out. We're going to put another one over here. Yes, that looks much better. Okay. And we're going to hit OK. Now let's go back to shaded. I like how this flutes out here, but I don't like how this flutes out here. It just seems a little weird. I want it the same thickness as this. So I'm going to have to create a profile for it, because if you remember when we created these profiles, I couldn't edit this separately from this. And you can edit the profiles after you have them done, but it still doesn't let you change this independently of this. The best way to do this, I'm going to delete my sweep, is to create your own profile, and I'll show you how to do that. When I draw curves, I like to do them in the top view. It's not necessary, but that's just where I like to keep them. Okay. Curve tab, line tool. We can also do polyline. So line creates one segment. Polyline creates new lines where the last one ended. So this is probably better for us. I know I want the bottom of my shape to be 2 millimeters wide. I know I want the top of my shape to be 4 millimeters wide. So I'm going to click here, here, here. That's roughly the cross section I want. I'm not concerned about how tall this is because that's controlled by my rails, but the width is important. If your cursor is not clicking to those squares, that means your grid snap is turned off, and that's right down here. You can turn that on and off. So for example, if it's turned off, I can click anywhere and it's a lot harder to be precise. So for this, I definitely want my grid snap on. Sometimes you don't. Okay, I can put that profile anywhere I want. Doesn't matter. So now I'm going to go back and I'm going to create profile on 2 curves. So we did that a little bit ago. Again, select your curves. Okay. We want that plan D. We're going to move the location to right about where that one is. There we go. Okay. But instead of this profile, I'm going to select a profile. So add profile, select profile. Select it, select profile. There we go. See, it changed it. So now I want my thickness to match or be very close to this one down here. That looks good. I don't want to fillet it right now. I could like fillet it a little bit, but I want that nice and sharp. So we're going to create it. So now I have a profile that I like better. Let's get rid of that one and that one, and we're going to mirror this one just like we did before. So mirror y-axis. Okay. Great. Now let's talk about the history command. If I move this curve, the sweep does not change. But what if I've made my sweep and I decided, oh, I don't like that. I want to change the profile. I want to do something else with it. That's when the history command comes in. Now, in Matrix Gold, many of the commands already have history built in. So you don't have to worry about that. It's already there. Not so much in Grasshopper Gold. So, because it wasn't originally built into Rhino. But a few versions back, they did add this record history button. And it doesn't record everything you do, it only records per command. So you have to kind of think, okay, for this command, am I going to want to have history? In this case, when you're doing a sweep, you usually want to have a history because there's often some adjusting that needs to be done. So we're going to go to our surface tools and back to where our sweeps are. We're going to click record history and do a 2-rail sweep. So it's recording because I hit record, but it'll end at the end of the command. So 1 rail, 2 rails, cross section, cross section, cross section. My cross sections are in weird spots, or my seams are in weird spots now. So let's just kind of try to move those to better locations. I'm going to put them all in the middle, pointing the same direction. Okay, great. So now that doesn't have that point sticking out here. I like that much better. I'm probably going to want to add the slashes though. Yes. Okay. Yep, I like that shape better. Okay. Now, here's why we did the history. If I select my curve and I want to edit it, I can go up here and edit my profile. And select profile. Okay. I put a little temporary construction plane there for me. I can edit my control points. I can scale it. Like that. Okay. And hold on 1 moment. Okay. Okay. There we go. So you can see it changed where my profile is. I don't like that. And unfortunately, you can't seem to undo these commands. So if I hit Control Z, doesn't happen. Okay, so I'm going to have to either remake my sweep or modify my profile again. So I don't particularly like that about Grasshopper Gold, but it's a big improvement from just straight up doing jewelry and Rhino. So I'm not going to complain too much. Okay, so let's go back and mirror the one that I like. And I'll do the sweep again. This time I'm not going to record the history. So I'm pretty sure it's where I want it to be. Got overzealous and didn't change my seams. That can make a big difference on how your sweep shows up. Again, especially if you're going in multiple directions, this sweep is planar, so it's not quite as bad, but okay. That looks much better. Now, when we want to make this a solid, because right now it's just a surface, it's hollow, we have two options. We can put a profile cap on it. And use the Grasshopper Gold command. So if I select the profile, it puts a little buffy cap on it, which will just create the cap, but it creates it as a separate entity. I'll show you. So she's got a little tiny cap, great. It's a separate surface. Or I can just type in the command cap. And it puts a flat surface right on there. In this case, I'm going to go with the flat surface. If you want something a little more finished, you can do a profile cap and it's a little more bubbled out, that's fine. Same for this guy here. Now I have solids. Those can be Boolean together. I'm also going to want to create a hole right in the middle here. Because when you place a die struck head into a mounting, they usually have a peg at the bottom. That peg helps you line it up right where you want it. And it creates more surface area that is soldered to the ring so that you don't snap the head off. So I'm going to create that hole now. I'm going to create, I can do this two ways. I can put a line in here and create a pipe, or I can just create a cylinder. Cylinder is probably your most direct. So we're going to create a cylinder. Go to the top view. I want it in the world center. So if you remember from the instructions, we set that as a hotkey for F4, which is the world center command in Matrix. That's why I chose that. And I need to decide what my diameter is. I'll click on diameter. Let's go with 1 millimeter. That's probably smaller than our peg, but that's okay because after we cast, we're going to drill the hole for the peg and make it the size of the peg we need. And then we're just going to choose how high we want it. Doesn't matter, it just needs to go through this. Okay, that's in there. So now you're going to do your first Boolean operation. Boolean is adding and subtracting shapes from each other. And they have to be solids to do this, which means they have to be a completely closed form. That's why we put those caps on there. In our solid tools, up here are your Boolean commands. Boolean union obviously sticks them together. Boolean difference subtracts one from the other. Intersection takes the area where the two pieces intersect and gets rid of everything else. Split splits the objects into the first object, the second object, and it creates a third object where the two overlapped. In this case, I'm just cutting one out of the other. So I'm going to go difference. Select the surface or poly surfaces to subtract from. That's the thing you're cutting a hole in. So that's this one here. Right click. Then I'm going to subtract my little pipe. Select that. Right click. Okay. Now, it left my pipe in there because I had delete input set to no. You would want to keep your subtraction oftentimes, especially if it's a more complex shape, just in case you're going to need it later. In this case, I didn't need it, so I'll just delete it. And you can see there's my hole. So you can set it to just go ahead and delete it and get it out of your way. Okay, that's good. I want to stick these two together because they're still two separate things. So we're going to union those. This one, right click, to this one, right click. Now, it didn't do it. Oh, there we go. It failed. Okay. When your union fails or when your Boolean fails, it is often because you have two surfaces that are kind of occupying the exact same space. So that's probably right here. It confuses the computer. So I'm going to go to my front view and I'm just going to move this in any direction the tiniest bit. I'm going to move it up, just like that's it. Or I could click on it and 0.001. There. That should do the trick. It might have issues because I filleted one and not the other, but let's see. Click both, right click. Now it's happy. So that is our cathedral ring. We may want to put in what are called airways. That's a cutout right here. Usually it's just a decorative element. The reason you'd want to put that in is one, again, it's decorative, but also it saves a considerable amount of weight. Sometimes you may want to open here. Let's talk about how that works. I'm going to offset my curves so that they match my rail curves. So I'm going to go back to the curve tool. And right here is offset curve. I'm going to offset this by 1 millimeter. So I type in 1, that's my distance. And it offsets the curve. So I have a curve that matches. It's 1 millimeter thick right here. Now I know this is 1.8. So I might want to match that because if I make it 1 millimeter, there's going to be a weird thing here. Let's go ahead and make it 1.5, maybe a little smaller. There we go. Okay. It's getting hard to see what I'm doing. So I'm going to move this to a different layer, say sky blue layer. Now you can see your lines, or I can just turn the light bulb off. Now I don't have to see it. Okay. I know that this profile is where my sweep stops. So if I wanted to make this cutout all the way through, I'd probably want to make it match this profile. But then this runs the risk of being able to be squished. So let's not do that. So I'm going to decide where I want my airway to stop. And I think, let's see, I'll hit F4 to start at 0. And yeah, we can go here. Now that doesn't match, so I would really like to rotate that. So let's make it parallel to our curve here. Move it over, that's pretty good. So I'm going to cut this out. So I want to trim these three to each other. So I'm going to go over here to the trim command and select them. When you're trimming, you just select the parts you want to get rid of. So I've selected all the parts I'm cutting to, right click, object to trim, and it just gets rid of them. An additional option, if you're doing a lot of trimming, you can choose fillet, set your radius to 0, and then click on them. Closed curves, it doesn't like to cut them. So that's why it didn't cut. But if you have other lines, it's fine. So we'll go back and trim that guy. Done. Okay. This is a really, really tiny area, so I am going to fillet that. Point. Radius 0.0625. It's really random. That's pretty small. Let's wait. 1. Quarter millimeter. Keep in mind, this is all millimeters. Like this is a millimeter, so it's tiny. That's much better. Okay. I'm going to join them so that I can make a closed curve because we're going to extrude this, and you don't want to extrude a non-closed curve because then you don't get a solid. So I'm going to extrude this curve that is closed. See, it's one closed curve. Solid tools. Down here we have extrude closed planar curve. And I can choose both sides, one side. In this case, since it's in the center, I'm going to do both sides. And it needs to go out past where my ring is. That looks good. Okay. I'm also going to do it on the other side. So we're going to mirror again. There we go. Turn this back on and do our last Boolean. Boolean difference because we're cutting it out. And there's our airway. So like I said, that saves weight. And that's the reason you would want to do that. It also adds a detail for the ring. Our last step, we save it. You should save periodically. Just in case your computer crashes. And we have one full solid. Go to File, Export Selected. Figure out where you're going to save it. Click your file type, you want to save in STL because that's what we're going to print. STL Solitaire. Save. It's going to ask you the maximum distance between this surface and what it creates the mesh. We can click preview and it'll show us what the mesh looks like. There we go. So if we zoom in here, that's what our mesh looks like, all the little triangles. We can use detailed controls to change some of the settings. I usually don't change them. And hit OK. Done. Now you're ready to print.